Thank you for joining us at the ThunderCast. I am your host, Lyle Convoy, and with me I have Couch Boy.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Mark Pellegrini. And my boy, Marmaduke.
Hey, honey, hey!
Alright, so we have a fun little episode for you guys today, all like two that might actually be watching. We are going to be discussing two ThunderCat episodes like normal, but instead of doing a comic or a character retrospective, we're just going to give our own thoughts on what we would do if we were in control of a ThunderCat series. Oh, let me shut this off. All right. So
we're not going to do a character retrospective on Frog Dog to recognize his sacrifice.
Oh, we can. We can do a short one. He lived and he died. Anywho,
he lived and he died. Exactly.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Justin Thomas. All right. So, two episodes we're covering today are Return to Thundera, not to be confused with a 5-part miniseries that goes on later in the show, and Dr. Dometone. So I know that you've been waiting for both these episodes, so why don't you go ahead and lead us into Return to Thundera. Mark?
Well, Frog Dog totally dies, and he dies the way he lived, like insignificantly. But
don't you dare say that about Frog Dog ever again.
Real.
I mean, I know we got to get into what the plot of the episode is, but yeah. I just want to say, like, Frog Dog's adorable. I don't know what this adorable floppy-eared reptile puppy is doing in Castle Plundar, hanging out with the mutants, and then he just dies, and that's the end of Frog Dog. Like, oh,
how's it going, Retro Gamer?
Man.
Okay, number one, Frog Dog was doing his best, and in fairness, I would assume he gets unfrozen once the Warbot got destroyed. Like,
yeah, that's what
unconfirmed kill.
Unconfirmed kill, but a real quick synopsis before we go any further. Return to Thundera is an interesting episode in the sense that it picks back up a plot point about the time capsule that was left. And somehow, and they don't ever really explain it because why would they, the time capsule actually transports Lion-O into the past of Thundera right before it goes kablooey. And at the same time, the mutants unleash a warbot that they were in development of when Thundera blew up, and they unleash it on the Cat's Lair while Lion-O's lost in time. So that's basically the setup here. But we're going to go ahead and keep going. Mark, do you have any other thoughts about this episode, or what you liked about it, what you didn't like?
Hold on, let me dab my tear ducts real quick. Okay, this episode it's extremely good. It's actually what I would consider one of the most epic episodes of season 1. Beyond like the first episode, Exodus, and I guess that was the 2-part pilot, and then the 5-parter with Lion-O's anointment trials. But this episode, it ranks up there with like the Ghost ThunderCat episode. I can't remember what that one was
called,
but
the Ghost Warrior.
Gruen's episode, yeah. Gruen the Ghost Warrior. Thank you. It ranks up there as just one of the best ones. Even though it's got some like glaring plot holes, it's so good you don't ask the questions until after it's over. Like, why does the time capsule send Lion-O back in time? I don't know.
It has the word time in its name.
It's because he wanted to know what Thundera was like. That's all the reason.
The other thing, because that leads into another question. Like, he left Thundera when he was like 11 years old. How does he not remember what it looks like?
I was actually going to ask the same question.
He was too busy learning how to fight with a sword.
I guess. I mean, maybe he went into some brain damage because his time capsule or his capsule pod or whatever you call it, like, malfunctioned, and that kind of like gave him brain damage. I don't know. But even with those questions, those glaring plot holes, the episode moves so fast and it's so exciting. And there's so much to chew on in the episode. You have Lion-O going back in time. We get to see Thundera moments before it exploded. Lion-O meets his father. Lion-O has to say goodbye to his father, not knowing if he's going to survive, because there's Claudius. King Claudius has this line where he says that he has an escape pod that can take him away, but he's not sure if he's going to get there in time because he has to see the ThunderCats' escape vessel to safety first. So it ends with Lion-O not sure if his father is alive or not, but respecting his memory regardless. There's a great emotional core to the episode. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of mythology and history. It's actually the second part of a story arc because they had a previous episode where they regained the time capsule by Lion-O arm wrestling a caveman, which was also really good.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that.
Bunga meet no take me time machine.
Well, I love that after he beats that caveman, the caveman just stands up and goes like, "Oh, okay," and just like walks away like he's a gentleman caveman.
He's like,
He's like, I respect that you beat me.
Well, I mean, he looks almost like 1-to-1 for Evgeny Tartakovsky's primal character.
Really does.
Yeah.
Who's
I need to
who's
check
also
that out.
like the same caveman that appeared in Dexter's Laboratory, like the caveman that invented fire. But that's getting off topic.
What if the caveman's a time traveler?
Oh man, everybody's a time traveler in this show. Like even Jaga. I love the part where he goes back in time and Jaga appears to him and he's like, Jaga, what are you doing here? Like, we're back in time. Like, I am Jaga. I don't gotta
I'm here.
explain shit.
I do what I want.
And he's like, oh, by the way, Thundera is very dangerous. Watch out. And then he disappears, and then a big-ass rad scorpion-looking thing crawls out of his fissure and tries to whoop Lino's ass.
Jaga's like, what did I just tell you?
You're not going to help Ghost Grandpa? Okay.
So one of the other things I really dig about the episode is that the first thing that happens when Lino gets to like the city is that there's just two ThunderCat guards, you know, sitting there holding ray guns on him, and they don't let up until they see that he's got the Sword of Omens and that he's the Lord of the ThunderCats. It's this idea that before Thundera blew up, you know, there are a lot more than just 7 ThunderCats, because even Jaga refers to the ThunderCats who are escaping on their ship, you know, the main ones, as the ThunderCat nobles, which, you know, kind of makes a distinction for them. But there are also ThunderCats, you know, who are just like rank and file, like that was their army. Like there's the ones who just stand guard outside the city with ray guns. But now that, you know, 90% of all Thunderians are dead, there's really just 7 ThunderCats left. And just little things inferred about the mythology like that was really impressive. And just the Warbot itself, it's so frustrating because the mutants should have won. They had this in the bag. Lion-O cheated. He went back in time and he found the freaking plans to the Warbot. Like this is not on the mutants. They had a good plan. And then Mum-Ra laughs at them at the end, like,
You suck.
Did you catch what?
Sorry,
Did you catch what I noticed in that episode at the very end? Did you catch that when you rewatched it?
Probably
what
not.
part?
When Mum-Ra's walking away and he's ranting about only my mystical, magical, and the mutants are looking at him like this old man's just ranting at us. What did we do?
Yeah. He's going on about those damn mutants on their phones.
Their damn technology.
Plot-wise, I think it's really interesting how this continues the theme of the mutants actually having better technology than the ThunderCats, and the kind of like the power back and forth between Mum-Ra and the mutants. I think they do a very good job of having, I don't know, like threads go throughout multiple episodes they don't like dumb it down to saying, hey guys, Mum-Ra's really mad because he feels like they're going to replace him with technology. You just infer.
What flaming homosexual character said that in the
Vulture Man.
Hey guys, like, well, with the mutants.
Oh goodness. Continuing on. How's it going, Evelyn? All right, so Mark's got some very unique takes on this episode. Let's go ahead and move on to Couch. Couch, you got any thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
I thought you were moving on to the next episode. Go ahead. You can go ahead and let the Couch talk. I feel that.
No, you're good, Mom. I don't think I can really say a lot. Mark pretty much covered a lot of the stuff that, you know, kind of the similar stuff, like opinions that I had. But I do want to talk a couple things about this episode. One, first, I have a love-hate relationship with the Warbot's design from an aesthetic standpoint. Because on one hand, it looks very, very wrong, if that makes sense. I mean, it's got this weird centaur body with these big, stumpy, like thick, stompy cylinder feet. And then this like creepy, spindly little neck with this big head. It kind of looks like an upside down bowl and like a weird cross-eyed face. And while at first I really, really hated this design, I almost kind of have a new appreciation for it, because the fact that it looks so just wrong proportion-wise, I think adds to like the unsettling factor. Like it's very just upsetting to look at. Like the one scene where it's like head is like looming over the hole in Cat's lair. I jumped a little bit while I was watching that. It was just kind of like, ugh.
it's such a serious threat. Like when it comes to like it's not over designed. I mean, it's oddly designed, but that thing is built for one thing, and that's just to just kill the Thundercats. It's an absolute
Yeah.
unit. It's just a tank, and
Yeah,
it just
it's
stomps
just
over there, and that's all it does is like it's a freaking Terminator, and it rips the head off Cat's lair. I mean, like that's
Yeah.
when
it's
like
just
the shit got real moment. Like that's serious.
If
And they
the,
even say at the end during the denouement that like that thing came within 1 inch of killing us. Like man, intense.
yeah, just seeing its like beady little eyes staring at you with like no emotion. It's just
Well, I've
very
come to
unsettling.
realize that mutant technology is kind of like proto orcs from Warhammer. They just kind of throw it together and hope it works. You find out later.
Yeah.
Have you ever? And the thing is, like Thundercats came out in 1985, Warhammer came out in like '87. But if you were to take the mutant fist pounder to like a Games Workshop, nobody would be able to tell that it wasn't orc made. That's just how the mutants construct things. Well, we're gonna throw this thing together and hope it looks like a nightmare.
I actually work at an LGS, so I can confirm. I don't personally play Warhammer, but I work at a place where a lot of people play Warhammer, and there's like a shelf that has a lot of minis from it. And yeah, so some of them do kind of look like something straight out of ThunderCats.
Now I have to go ahead and go on this tangent, and it's gonna cover I think the not for kids thing. Okay, so there's this guy I talked to online. He goes by the moniker of Jace, and one day we were talking about Thundercats, and I mentioned the name of the mutant fist pounder, and he thought it was the funniest thing he's ever heard. And he uses it. He uses it synonymous for genitalia now. So apparently he went to a
Ooh.
bar and walked up to him and said, "Hey, baby, you want to see my mutant fist pounder?"
Good God.
It works.
Nice.
That's funny.
Yeah, because he
I
took her home
tried
and,
that
and,
with,
and showed her his mint condition fist pounder, and your panties just dropped.
Now, when you say
Yeah, it's like when I try to pick up girls at my local comic shop. I ask them if they want to see my giant size man thing. So far, 0 offers taken up. But
God,
it's always tomorrow.
that's sad that I got that reference. All right, so any other thoughts, Couch?
Not particularly, no.
All right, Marmaduke, now it's your turn.
All right, I'd say this is a solid episode in the sense that in a lot of them, I noticed there's like awkward animation and then really stellar over-the-top animation. Where they clearly pour all their budget into a few key scenes. I thought this was just like an overall good-looking episode where I didn't see either like the extreme errors on the one side. There were a few like great over-the-top action sequences, but nothing like the crazy things where like they're all running through the corridor and the camera's moving through the corridor, or the like that T-Rex ripping apart the trees. It's one of my favorite scenes in the series so far. Also, from a narrative perspective, I was really interested in just how odd Lionel's conversation with his father is, where he directly tells him, "I am Lionel," and his father seems to not quite believe him, and yet be open to the possibility that this may be his son.
Yeah.
Because at first you think, well, come on, he told you I am Lionel, right? You think his response would be, why are you impersonating my son? But he it's almost like
he's blind. How could he? He can't be sure. Like I can't see you, so maybe you are my son.
I don't know
Yeah.
though. I think if I think the voice change would be a little different. Like if all of a sudden my 11-year-old who usually talks to this suddenly sounded like a grown ass man, I'd be a little concerned.
Well, not only that, like you got to keep in mind, like contextually, the world and the universe that Cloudus lives in has some strange things in it. So being somewhat hesitant, like you can't be my son. No, my son's a little boy. You got muscles.
I also like that there was a Chinese lion in the ThunderCats lair where they hid the plans. That was just like a nice little I don't know, taking a real world cultural inspiration.
Yeah, the food dog.
Yeah.
Maybe Cloudus is a
Well,
weeb.
you talked about the animation and parts of it where it was really good. There's one little detail, and it was very Japanese. Japanese animators, I think a lot of them come from like engineering schools and architecture schools first. Like they get their degree to please their families, and then they go into animation. Because they love to show how things work. They love to show the mechanics of any sort of mecha. That's why Japanese mecha always, those cartoon animes always look so good. The catapults in this episode, they show the gears, where it bends. They show the little catch of what holds it down. They show how that thing works, and it's so detailed and it's really lovely. And it's just for a few shots when they first show the catapults, But I thought that reminded me of like watching, like any sort of like Gundam or Mecha show where they always like to show the little bits inside the joints of the legs to show where they click and whir and catch, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they're called gatai sequences, and they're really neat. All right, Marmaduke, you got any other thoughts on the episode?
Overall solid episode. I like seeing Lion-O's past. I kind of agree with Mark. It was also interesting to see like non-Lord. I also kind of just like the detail that they figured, well, the planet's about to blow up, so who cares? You can come in. That is such a blue collar response.
It's our last day, man. Yeah, if you want to make it a little darker, you do realize they die. Those guards are dead.
Wait, I thought Claudius was waiting for them to get off.
No, he was waiting. Yes, he was waiting for them to get off. In the ships that we saw in the first episode, which all of one got blown up.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe they were on the one.
Maybe I forgot that everyone died.
Well, not quite everyone. Just most of the ThunderCats.
Of everyone.
Well, not even 90%. Like it seems based also on ancillary media, and we see later on in the season there are a lot of Thunderian refugees. So it seems like they let some refugees onto the ThunderCat ships that were leaving with the flagship. Based also on what Slide says in the cutscene, that it's filled with XYZ. They carry little in way of armament. Basically meaning they were trying to be additional boats here, and they just didn't quite make it because they got exploded. So
I feel like those guards, they're probably the ones who, those lifeboats were probably for civilians first, because the ThunderCats are a noble race, so it's women and children first onto the boats to get away. And so if you're a ThunderCat, that means you go down with the planet, unless you're a noble, in which case you get to go on a ship and get away with the Eye of Thundera. But I have a feeling those guards, if they were that late in the game, they're hanging out with Claudius, that they probably went down with the ship. But that's another thing. Claudius, the king of the ThunderCats, the lord of the ThunderCats, he didn't get on the ship to go away with everybody. He stayed behind, the captain of the ship, to make sure that everybody got out fine. And then he was willing to explode with the planet. That kind of nobility in a character. And it's not dwelled upon in the episode. It's just something you pick up on.
No, but they do.
Which was really impressive.
They did have a nice key piece of continuity there. Why did Claudius stay behind?
Because the ship had like messed up gyroscopes or something.
It had one messed up landing beam, which is what you saw fail in the first episode, and that's why they crashed.
Oh, okay.
I
remember that.
Good eye.
But no, there's a few fun things about Claudius, and of course I'm going to go ahead and take over here. He's the only person so far in the show that's a Thunderian or a ThunderCat that's name isn't based on a cat.
Oh, it's based on a claw.
No, his name isn't even spelled with a W. It's Clau, and it goes on. It's not claw like claw. It's just Claudius, and I never did figure out why that was, but it's really interesting because this gives more deep lore into ThunderCats. Well, Claudius was Lord of the ThunderCats, and in several ways he still is, but he passed the mantle on to Jaga because he wound up getting blinded apparently in the mutant war, which is what he alludes to. And that's why you always have a backup like, say, Tigra in case something happens to Lion-O. So being Lord of the ThunderCats is usually hereditary, but it can be passed in other ways in case you need it. So let me go ahead and read out now the show notes here. It was written by Bob Haney. It says, in a series like ThunderCats, there are certain episodes that, with their title alone, alert everyone to prepare for a classic installment. That this episode would see a return to Thundera is reason enough to watch, and the opportunity to see more of the ThunderCats' home planet would have always been utterly compelling. Completing a hat trick of superb episodes, Bob Haney delivers everything any schoolboy or girl could possibly have hoped for, and this stands among the series' very best adventures. Picking up from the events of Peter Lawrence's The Time Capsule, the episode tells two separate tales which converge in the climax. While it is perhaps disappointing that more screen time is not allocated to Thundera, it is understandable given the series' focus on present-day struggle on Third Earth rather than previous encounters. To see the Thunderian capital and meet Lion-O's father, Claudius, and pet, Kano, is wonderful, and the scene's tender execution makes them truly memorable. Lion-O's emotional response to seeing his father once again is subtle and understated, but resonates nonetheless, and Claudius' final speech, beautifully crafted, "May my son, Lion-O, grow to be as brave and noble as you." We are also given the new information about the ThunderCats' exodus from their planet. and Claudius' sacrifice on Thundera goes some way to explaining Jaga's stewardship of the team in the opening episode. Meanwhile, having crafted a secondary plot based on Third Earth, Bob Haney embellishes this section of the script with as many bells and whistles. Great scenes include the head of Cat's lair being ripped off and near abandonment of the ThunderCats' home. Once again, Haney proves that, to have an effective resolution to a story, plot points must be seeded early on. And, besides being a nice scene in its own right, the visit of Slythe and Vultureman to Claudius sets the wheels in motion. The unexpected result of the mutants' defeat is, at last, that they have not been utterly humiliated. They could not have possibly known that the ThunderCats would obtain plans for the Warbot, and their failure was far more bad luck than poor judgment.
Thank you.
Ultimately, Return to Thundera sums up everything that was distinctive about ThunderCats. For action, adventure, tension, and an underlying emotional gravitas, the viewer needed to look no further. And here's the script editor, Peter Lawrence, who wrote the previous episode. An interesting and challenging idea, but the critics are quite right. There's no reasonable explanation for the fact that Lion-O ends up on Thundera on exactly the right day for this story to unfold. It's hard for me to accept that we missed this glaring error. With hindsight, this episode sees Bob moving out of the natural territory with the use of the Warbot. As I have said elsewhere, he is more inclined to classics and grand character literary themes. In fact, he was rather a grand old hippie with long grayish hair and that peace and love demeanor, though perhaps a touch bitter at his lack of worldwide recognition. He would have liked to have lived as a novelist or mainstream playwright then, for all we know, may have written books and plays, but like many writers, some immensely talented, he never got his break. I'm not sure either of the extent of his output, his body of work. I recall that at least on his own material, he worked rather slowly. As a sidebar, he was related to Chevy Chase? What the heck? May have been his uncle. And Chevy was always encouraging and supportive. Even with that connection, Bob never made a jump into bigger league. A great shame. He was a nice man. The reunion of this story...
Just roasting Bob.
God.
Yeah.
The reunion in this story of Lion-O with Claudius and Kano is very much in Bob's style. And there's an odd marriage between these two archetypal themes of the more sci-fi Warbot absorber disc elements. Depending on your purism, this marriage either gives you an interesting or eclectic story, or it is a bit muddled. Now, I will say this. I'm glad that they addressed it. We don't even know how we missed that. Because sometimes when you're writing something, you want to put the idea out there so quickly, you don't really cover all your bases. And we find out later on, of course, in the later seasons, Claudius isn't dead. He got, like, kidnapped in the middle of the planet exploding somehow. So ThunderCats is wild when it comes to fiction.
Is Pet Cat okay?
No. Pet Cat is dead.
This episode is just killing animals left and right. What the hell? Frog Dog, the big cat, like, oh.
Kano.
The giant scorpion, he's dead too.
We need to bring back ThunderCats memes, right? Like introduce the Zeds to ThunderCats using language they speak. Get Frog Dog compilations, sad violin music, the works.
Also, real quick, Justin Thomas, Lion-O had a pet and it wasn't Snarf. No, Snarf is not a pet. Snarf is Lion-O's surrogate father. Despite what the 2011 series did to that poor character. But all right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next episode. I'll give a summary and then we'll start in the same order. In the episode Dr. Dometone, the ThunderCats are approached by his own admission, the last bit of humanity on Third Earth, Dr. Dometone, who, with giant mechanical frogs, and follow with me here, protects the oceanic plug that is at the base of the ocean, because if it's opened, it's going to drain the planet's water into the core and kill the entire planet. So
here comes Neil deGrasse Tyson! Correct.
Actually.
Well, I mean, I would love to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson play Dr. Dometone in my variation of ThunderCats. That would be great. Just every time somebody says something slightly wrong, actually, according to my... Yeah, that'd be great. But anyways, it's any fiction, when taken to pure cynicism and pure measurement of reality, is silly. But this episode has such outlandish things that it's just fun to watch. You're not going to watch this episode for the action. You're going to watch it because it's absurd. But let's go ahead and start with you, Mark.
Dr. Dometone, I love this episode. What I love about this episode is the attitude, is that it is very much a comedy relief episode, but it's not in your face about it. The entire premise of it is ridiculous. This guy, this doctor who does a Terry Thomas impression. I'm sure enough like 70-year-old people listening will know who Terry Thomas is. And his giant frog goes to the Thundercats to protect a giant bathtub plug from being pulled in the ocean and destroying the planet from this raider from outer space and his giant electric eel robot. I mean, and the only way to stop them is for Lion-O and Wily Cat to dress up as sharks. It is so goofy in premise, but the tone of the episode treats it like it's any other adventure. Like it's not over the top with how goofy it is. Like the Thundercats tackle this dilemma with the same attitude as they would an episode like Return to Thundera, which was very serious and very dark. This episode is the exact opposite, but the tone doesn't change. It's funny because the premise of it is funny, and it doesn't need to try harder than that, which I really appreciate. It doesn't have to do the whole wink, wink, nudge, nudge, slap you in the face, but hey, we're being goofy. Hey, we're being goofy. You can get it when you watch it, and everything about it is just so much fun. The animation in it is also really good. It's another like 2 in a row for just really solid animation for the series. And I guess I don't really have too much else to say about it.
I actually pulled up an image and put it on screen.
Oh, so whenever I talk on these things, I walk around in circles.
No, it's all good. I found the shark outfits.
Excellent.
Oh God, yes, I love it. I like that this is kind of a Wily Kit focused episode where it's really she makes friends with Dr. Dometone, and she's the one who kind of vouches for him after his giant frog Herky eats her. And then so she's just hanging out with them and like they're buddies through the whole episode. It's really cute. And there's the sharks. But even when they're dressed like that, they're like Lion-O's not. He doesn't have a moment where he goes like, "I look stupid." He doesn't have to say that. The audience knows he looks stupid. But he's like jumping into it like, "Oh, they're gonna pull the plug in the ocean. We got to get to work. There's no time to be self-referential."
And then it actually has plot relevance because for a second they trick Screep into thinking they're actually sharks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I love is like in the world of ThunderCats, a idea like that. We see how the character responds. Lion-O's just basically like, "Oh, that sounds reasonable. Sure, I'll go help." It's just not even a question. That's what I love about this type of fiction. You can do anything with it, anything. And yes, this is why Tiger Sharks makes more sense, but not in writing. Tiger Sharks is like the worst of all the Ronkin Boss cartoons.
Oh.
I can never finish it, even though it's really short. It's like 13 episodes. I couldn't get into it. And it's also that you can't find that show in like decent quality online, or I never could. It always looked like very, very bad.
That's because God's trying to hide it for our own good.
Possibly.
All right, you're up, Couch.
All right, so so kind of expanding on what Mark said about the animation, the animation in this episode I almost feel like it was better than this episode deserves. Because the first time I watched it, I remember as a kid, I remember really not liking it. So when we said, "Oh, we're gonna do this episode next on the show," I was honestly a little disappointed because I'm like, "Oh, here we go. I probably won't have much to say about it." But re-watching it, there was a lot of stuff I really liked about it, because the animation in this one, in particular, this scene where Wily Cat is running away from Herky, the big frog robot, because he thinks, "Oh my God, it's gonna eat me," despite very obviously being a robot. But anyway, like the running animation is just extremely fluid, and I feel like they played a little bit more with expressions in this episode. They kind of pushed them a little more than they do normally in ThunderCats, which I liked. Honestly, overall. Now, granted, it's been a long time since I've watched the entirety of season 1, but so far, this is probably the best animation I've ever seen in a season 1 episode. I also really liked the underwater atmosphere. When they showed is it just called the dome? Was there an actual name for like the complex where like the plug and stuff was, or?
I think it's just called the Oceanic Plug.
The Oceanic Plug actually kind of reminded me of Soma, which is, for those that are unfamiliar, is a horror game that came out in, I believe it was 2015, that took place entirely underwater. And I'm not sure. And like, I felt like the complex, the oceanic plug, felt very, very similar to it, and I really liked that about it. But aside from that, I don't really think I have any additional thoughts on the episodes. For being a goofy one, I liked how it wasn't really in your face goofy, and I also liked the little bit at the end where Wiley Kid and Wiley Cat are kind of screwing with them. They're like, "Oh, we're having fish tonight," and then Wiley Cat comes out in the
They
suit.
just throw stuff at him. It was great.
And they just start throwing the plates, because aside from that scene being really, really funny, it's nice to see the Thundercats all kind of acting like a family unit and like screwing with each other.
Yes, it is very wholesome, and I wish I had clipped the clip, but I didn't get home in time.
Yeah.
Well, how do you want me? Boiled or fried?
Boiled or fried?
Oh, God.
Dead. The answer is
Apparently,
dead.
Tinder with a hammer.
Yeah, it's just really nice to see them razzing each other instead of being nicey with each other all the time, because it really drives home the fact that, you know, above all else, they are a family. But yeah, I think those are my kind of closing thoughts on the episode. If Marm, you wanted to take the stage.
Sure. To tying into what Mark said about Wile E. Kit kind of being an emotional center to this episode, I like that the moral theme is kind of carried throughout it. You actually don't get the payoff until the end. Oh yeah, if Lino had just zapped Herky, he'd have killed Wile E. Kit and stopped their only weapon from saving the planet. I also kind of like that, you know, by her giving Hercules the pet name Herky, it kind of gives it this sort of cute sweetness. So when it's actually fighting Rake, I'm actually kind of invested in Herky getting his butt kicked, right? Even though he's a robot. And Scrape is just kind of dope because he's a ruthless. I guess he's just there to collect resources, and he doesn't care who gets hurt along the way. But then he'll do things like he'll warn people, "Hey, get out of here before I unplug it." So it's not like he just wantonly wants to murder everyone. It's just that he's okay if a lot of people die, so he can get his resources. He seems like a ruthless. I don't know, not a ruthless capitalist, but like a ruthless guy who's just hunting after other people's resources, not necessarily just like a murder hobo or something.
Murder hobo. Man, there are a lot of those in ThunderCats.
Good Lord, you people worry me.
That's it. You guys know that? That's like a reference to like D&D. Even though
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
All right.
My DM has a strict ban on murder hobos, and honestly, I support it.
All right, so fun thing here that I didn't hear anybody mention. In this episode, they flat out talk about a dude dying. Like, there were two robots. There was Hercules and Samson. Both had pilots. Samson's dead.
I did. The pilot part didn't occur to me. I thought they were just.
He's with
I
Frog
thought they
Dog
just-
now.
He's a frog
I
dog.
thought they just had like a very basic AI and that they could be controlled without a person, but there's a person in there when the other one died.
Well, I mean, we never see.
I mean, if Dometone was piloting Herc, I guess someone had to be piloting Samson. Stands to reason.
Oh,
Okay,
So
but did it like blow up? Is there like like I need to see confirmed kills here. I need to see a body on the screen.
Here. I'll tell you what. I'll do you one better. All right. If I was able to get the clip up, I would, but I can't. So just imagine the episode where it gets squeezed. Lost the lead. There. There's your confirmed death.
There we go.
Well, I like that even with people dying and the planet about to explode, Dometone still stops to have a picnic with Wile E. Kit. And he gets flowers in a vase and everything.
Yeah, and then of course Lino and Wile E. Cat jump out of the woods and just jump this tiny old man.
Okay, in fairness, if I was in Lionel's position, I saw some old man like hanging out with a 12-year-old, I'd be throwing down too.
Yeah.
I'd be a little mad.
I'd be running out saying, "Catch these hands, ho!"
Yeah, that's what
Look,
Lino said
it's
in the
old
episode. That's my favorite part.
Get him.
I need to get Larry Kennedy to say that sometime. Probably could. But even in a comedy-centric episode, apparently they got to have a body count. But let's see here. All right, so we're gonna go to the show notes here. This is written by everybody's favorite writer, Bill Overgard. He gets a little crazier.
Boy.
Yeah.
Overguard.
Although a bizarre episode when viewed in context, absolutely, as an installment of ThunderCast, Dr. Dometone is nonetheless enjoyable. Bill Overgard once again demonstrates his vision that the ThunderCats themselves are more background accompaniment than star players. It's really weirdly phrased here. Having said that, he and scriptwriter Peter Lawrence just about managed to shoehorn Lion-O and the team into the plot. And while it still feels odd amongst its neighboring episodes, it just about gets away with it. On the plus side, Overgard creates another set of interesting characters, notably the eponymous Dr. Dometone, and the episode's premise is an interesting one. It is fascinating to see what can only be described as humanity still having a small presence on Third Earth. If we follow Leonard Starr's premise that the Third Earth is our Earth at some future point, then the information that the Great Oceanic Plug was installed 17 centuries previously opens up some new timelines for fans to speculate upon. Don't tell the nerds that. There is very little in the episode that doesn't seem wholly enjoyable, and it is littered with highlights, including the compressed air bubble climax, which is certainly one of the show's more technical and sophisticated resolutions. Also, we are given a glimpse of the ThunderCats' dining room, and there is an amusing scene where Scrape gets the research team a warning to abandon ship, and seconds later, we see all the emergency evacuation pods launching. The episode's greatest failing is that it simply feels too different. Many of the scenes would have been more at home in a Gary Anderson production, not notably Stingray. I don't know what that is. This is clearly not a reference I get. And even the shark disguise idea was explored previously in the popular Tintin cartoon adventures, Red Rackham's Treasure. Okay. Nevertheless, Overguard's imaginative introduction of alternative elements to the show delivered as many triumphs as it did disasters. Dr. Dometone may not feel like a standard ThunderCats fare, but I'm sure if you were to ask any child watching it the first time, they would have said they enjoyed it. Now, this is Peter Lawrence talking. I remember having a lot of difficulty editing this episode. I can imagine why. In truth, it didn't need the ThunderCats at all, and in the original draft, they were barely present. Plus, in the world of Dr. D was hardly Third Earth. It's true that Dr. D, he keeps calling him that, traveled to the lair to ask for help, but did he really need it? There's not much to be said about the story. The originality of it I love. The Great Oceanic Plug, Scrape. Except that if you were to ask more conventional episodes, this one is probably not for you. If you like the wilder side, then it is. But I had to fight for some of Bill's ideas, and they were absolutely worth fighting for. And I talked about this in previous ThunderCasts, but William Overgard, by what all the other writers have said, he didn't tend to write for ThunderCats. He tended to write strange stories that he put the ThunderCats into. A lot of the tertiary characters in ThunderCats were Bill Overgard just making new characters.
Yeah.
So he was like a fanfic author, kind of.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah. Well,
that hurt my
about
soul.
The ending there, where where they kind of like what happened to Scrape? Like, Mandora came by and picked them up. I wonder if that was something the editor put in or something Bill put in, because like if he doesn't really care so much about the continuity of ThunderCats, like I don't think he'd have put that reference in there. He was just like, what happened to Scrape? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it probably was
Sucked
Peter
down the
Lawrence.
drain.
Peter Lawrence was very much so focused on a tighter continuity, and for an '80s show, that's very rare. So I'm glad he was doing that. But no, it was a fun little episode. Very, very strange. I wonder, reading and watching ThunderCats as an adult, I wonder about Overgard's brain. Sometimes, and I'm a creative person myself, but I never once had an idea for a story. It's like, you know what, giant plug, fish costumes, mecha frogs. Now granted, that does sound pretty awesome, but you know,
really,
does this mean ThunderCats is a mech show?
Oh, by the way, just to get it out there, Stingray Lio Convoy was a show made by the same guy who did Thunderbirds. You know, the show with the creepy puppets that piloted airplanes.
Machines, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Stingray was the same show, the Super Marionation style show, except it was about an undersea lab and like submarines and stuff.
Okay, well, I appreciate that information. I have no clue, man. If it wasn't a cartoon, I didn't pay attention. All right.
It's there. I didn't like it either.
So, and yes, everybody remembers Street Sharks. I still remember the
I don't.
Well, okay, in fairness,
Joss.
Couch doesn't.
Yeah, fair. Yeah,
But-
no, I'm just being a bitch. We're good.
Couch, you have got to check out like Vin Diesel doing Street Shark commercials.
I'll have to
Oh,
check
those
it
are
out.
Yes.
epic.
Rocky Balboa action.
Shark puppet.
Yeah. It's fantastic. Like Vin Diesel is a complete nerd and he has no problem admitting it. But we're gonna go ahead now and we're gonna move into the feature presentation. We're gonna talk about an idea I put forward at the last ThunderCast, and I asked the people here, like, if you guys were making your own ThunderCats cartoon, what would you do with it? Keep in mind, you have free license to create any cartoon. The only thing I'd request is make sure that it's an all ages cartoon. So I don't think I'd have to worry about that. So I didn't even make that stipulation. But let's go ahead.
So I can't add a lot of slavery and rape. Is that correct?
Oh, no Wildstorm Thundercats.
Oh, my
I got
soul.
so good at drawing porn now that I have my fancy new tablet. I'm just kidding.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start with Couch this time.
Ooh, we're starting with me. Alrighty. Okay. So I was discussing this a little bit with Lio and the gang before the show, and I asked everyone, would you guys rather do a continuation of the original series or a reboot? So the setting of mine would be, I would say maybe about probably a year after the Book of Omens / potentially the Reclaiming Thundera comic. And in this timeline, I wouldn't really consider Enemy's Pride, The Return, or Dogs of War canon.
No.
It'd just be like, okay, Book of Omens ends, and then new show. I don't know. Let's call it Thundera Reborn or something like that. Because I don't know. That sounds cool. So Thundera has now become under Lion-O and the other Thunderian or the other ThunderCats direction, has become a thriving metropolis. Where the words I described it is in my notes, so I'm gonna go with that.
Oh man, she got notes. Notes.
I got notes. There's like 2 of them, but I got them. I have notes and a potential like very short episode synopsis if you guys want to go over that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
For if Lio ever buys the rights to ThunderCats from Warner Brothers.
Oh God.
Boy.
Start me a GoFundMe. We'll see where we go.
Steal my idea. Oh man. But anyway, let's continue. However, with Thundera becoming essentially like a city-state with a lot more people, Lion-O is starting to have a bit of a hard time managing the planet. Because, while he was very good at managing Third Earth and making everyone play nice, I feel like he wouldn't exactly make a very good politician, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Lion-O is very set in his ways. He has a very black and white sense of morality, which I don't have a problem with. But I feel like in this sort of setting, it would give an opportunity for more character development for Lion-O without undoing what the original series did, because this would be a completely new skill set that he would have to be dealing with. And there's a lot of things, kind of deals with more modern topics, like, oh, there's one guy in the episode synopsis who's a jerk politician who I'm going to talk about in a minute. But ultimately, the goal of this show would not be to take anything away or change anything about the original series. It would be kind of more to add, is my goal. Because I feel like, while I love ThunderCats, I think the big weakness that the original series had is it kind of introduced certain characters. I think the 3 biggest victims were probably the 3 new Thunderians they added in season 2, where they just kind of dropped them in and then didn't really explore their actual characters at all. So while my ThunderCats, excuse me, that was a lot.
It's all right.
Yeah, well, my ThunderCats would still, be an action cartoon, would also kind of deal a lot with like exploring character interactions, like, oh, how does this character interact with this character? What are these 2 characters' relationships? Why does this character act this way? Like, let's give a very vague example. Why is Bengali so mad all the time? So that would be a question that an episode would be proposing, and then we would come up with an answer. Oh, maybe he was, I don't know, mercilessly bullied as a kid for being an albino tiger. Boom, there we go, and then there's an episode about it. So this, I guess this could technically, so what this show would be doing would be kind of expanding on things that were never really brought up in the original series. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I do.
Okay. Now, on to the episode synopsis. So, the one thing I really, really want to happen that I feel like didn't in the original series is that I feel like Lion-O with these, well, I guess not bigger responsibilities, but different responsibilities. I feel like in the original show, he wasn't really allowed to screw up enough. Because the original ThunderCats, you know, while Lion-O did make a lot of mistakes, they were usually resolved in like a single episode because, you know, it's for the kiddies. But in this series, I'd kind of like to see what would happen if Lion-O, you know, makes a mistake that can't be solved in one episode, or maybe never actually gets solved. And this is kind of the episode that I have in mind that would be an example of it. So in the rebuilt Thundera, there's kind of like a senate, and each of the cat clans has like a specific representative that you know, kind of represents them to kind of talk about like, oh, there's a problem going on in the cheetah clan, and then this cheetah clan representative is going to talk about it to Lion-O in this big like Senate type thing. And for the Tiger Clan guy, haven't thought of a name for him yet. Maybe like, I don't know, Chairman. I actually did come up with a name. Let's call him Chairman Cyberus for now.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Siberian Tiger, something like that.
That.
There he is. All right. And Chairman Siberius is an asshole because not only is he an asshole, he's also a little racist because because tigers, I imagine in this scenario, are very perfection obsessed. So our friend Siberius here has a very big problem with a certain tiger on the ThunderCats team.
Is it Panthro?
Yes. He doesn't have any stripes. He doesn't belong here. No, it is Bengali.
Yeah.
He does not like the fact that Bengali is a ThunderCat. He's very rude to him while he's kind of a kiss ass to the other ThunderCats because he makes up some bullshit excuse like, oh, he's just a commoner. He shouldn't be a ThunderCat, or oh, he's a tiger, but he doesn't have magic to turn invisible, whatever, when in reality it's just ooga booga wrong color. And Lion-O, as you can imagine, handles it in the way, you know, Lion-O would. One day, in the Senate, Siberius says something really, really shitty about Bengali. Basically along the lines of, that little mutant shouldn't be in here. And Lion-O responds with, okay, you know what? I'm tired of this. You don't talk to my friends that way. Tiger Clan, the Tigers are no longer going to be represented in this courtroom. Get out. So basically, he kind of unknowingly strips the Tigers of all of their political presence.
Ah, that would be a problem.
Yes, because Siberius decided to be a jerk to one of his friends. And while this seems like the right thing to do in this scenario, I personally support what he did. It ends up backfiring horribly because, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but the racist Siberius tiger people are like, hey, this is screw Bengali, he sucks, and he starts getting harassed by a bunch of people ultimately like heightening the thing Lino was trying to avoid. And then it all comes to a head where Siberius sends some of his goons to essentially assassinate him and almost succeeds. This
I
is
like the.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I like the angle you have of Lionel having to deal with a different type of problem than he's used to dealing and not quite measuring up to it.
Right, yeah. Like he screws this up massively by kind of doing what he would do in the original show, but it backfires horribly. And he almost like, I mean, what Bengali almost dies because of this. I mean, there's a probably the most, this would probably be the most like out there quote unquote 15-year-old edgelord thing that would ever happen in this reboot, but there's a kind of silhouetted scene where Bengali gets stabbed by Siberius. He's okay, he doesn't die because this isn't the return. I'm not Wildstorm. But, you know, it's not doing so good. And Lion-O is like, oh my god, what did I just do? You know, and this isn't some, you know, obviously this isn't something that's going to get like cleaned up in just like the end of an episode. It's like, oh, episode's over, bad guy's gone, credits roll. But no, I mean, sure, I mean, Siberius gets caught by Lion-O, you know, stabbing a ThunderCat, so he goes to ThunderCat jail. But I mean, ultimately, Bengali
They
is
call
still
it Thunder
almost
Jail.
Thunder jail. He's going to the Hoosgow. He's getting locked up for a long time. But ultimately, Lion-O screwed up. And one of his really close friends had to pay the price for it. And then he almost kind of ruins his relationship with Bengali at that point because he's like, hey man, what the hell? I got stabbed. But yeah, ultimately, what I would want to do, my goals for this series would be to kind of explore stuff that wasn't really addressed in the original series, as well as, you know, kind of giving Lion-O an opportunity to deal with a very different set of challenges and let him screw up more. Because I think ultimately that's what makes a strong character. It's a character that can screw up and like really, really bad and then eventually rebound from it. Any thoughts, guys? Because that's pretty much it.
I'm really fascinated by the idea of Lion-O having a new set of challenges. I basically like the way I'd handle it, it would come a lot would come down to, you know, are we talking about a reboot or are we talking about a continuation? And I almost always hate reboots unless the staff basically earns my respect, in which case then I like love it absolutely because they've done like the hardest thing in the world. Like, I don't know if we need a reboot of ThunderCats. And what I like about your setup is you are continuing the story. You're kind of like, so for old fans, it's sort of answering like what happened after that, like where did they leave off? But you've taken into consideration how to keep Lion-O's character moving forward. When at the end of the series, I'm guessing he seems to have accomplished most of what he set out to accomplish. Right? It's a little bit like it's a little bit like Spider-Man, you know, being a dick in the '60s, and then by the '80s he's kind of a cool guy, and in the '90s he's learning to be a good husband, and then he's a dad to Spider-Girl before they take that all away. It's a very natural thing for a character to progress into maybe like progressively more and more responsibilities. So he's, you know, hitting things with a sword when he's young, but he's having to deal with, you know, other ThunderCats and their problems when he's older.
That jerk Siberius, screw that guy.
Yeah, I hear he smells funny.
Yeah, he sucks. Anyway, Lio, any comments or?
Actually, I have a bit of overlap with your stuff, so we'll go into that a little bit later when we talk about my stuff. But for now, it sounds pretty interesting. I wouldn't personally go with a continuation just due to the difference in time. And there was one 80s property, Voltron did it a few years ago with the Nickelodeon version of Voltron Lion Force, and it did not go very well.
So that's Lion Force is a continuation?
It was a continuation.
Yeah, we try to forget about Lion Force.
See?
Okay.
He knows.
But it had worse going for it than just being a sequel. It just had like terrible animation and character designs, and oh man, it's
Was that before the popular Voltron show everybody was talking about?
before the Netflix one. Yeah,
Okay.
it was like 5 years before the Netflix one, and it's just been kind of like swept under the rug. It's like New Adventures of Speed Racer from the 90s. Like everyone just wants to.
And real quick, I need to go ahead and insert this. I was sent something. Just give me a second here. Bit of breaking news. I'm gonna have to bust out here as a interim. And then
Falkland Islands have been invaded.
So I wouldn't report that on the ThunderCast. It's not ThunderCat related. Unless the ThunderCats did it, then it might be. Where in the world did I put that thing?
Oh, and someone, Brock McGinnis, just brought up Voltron: The Third Dimension, which was another sequel to Voltron that came before the Nickelodeon series, and it was also really bad. But that's the one that had the nightmarishly bad CG animation from the 90s. Oh man.
Yeah, well, oddly enough, Voltron: The Third Dimension, that was hold on. That was actually the very first fully animated cartoon CGI here in the States, like a full series.
Oh yeah, so like it wasn't like Canada and Mainframe that did like Beast Wars and Reboot. This is one that was done in the U.S. Yeah.
Correct. But
we were behind Canada. That's embarrassing.
Well, I mean, we're already underneath them.
Oh.
Aha, here we go. Okay, so let me go ahead and put this up. Apparently, Super 7 showed something on their Instagram, so we're now seeing the redone version for Pumaira. We see Tigra in the assortment for the new Super 7 figures. A fully transformed Mumra with Mammut and Groon in the lineup.
Can you show a picture?
It's on screen.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, ooh.
Oh man, I can't wait to. Super 7 does some great stuff. Man, my wallet can't take it.
So, I mean, they have really bad quality control, but I'm going to go ahead and buy them and review them so people will know whether or not they should buy them. But I'll go ahead and...
Sculpts are really nice. It just, yeah, you're right about the quality control.
But I like how the transform Mumra's T-posing.
Well, I mean, that's what he does whenever he's done transforming.
He's asserting dominance.
Well, I also like the fact that they actually got his scale right, which is odd for Super 7. They usually just use the same buck, but no, he's even taller than Groon. That's accurate. They actually did him right. Anywho, we're going to move on. Mark, I'm going to let you go next.
Okay, well, so we were talking about it a bit before the show, and I originally said continuation, and I had to think about that a bit more, because I was thinking about the sequel series to old cartoons that we've had versus the reboots to old cartoons that we've had, and which has been the better approach from what I can recall. And direct sequels, so ThunderCats, the original ThunderCats from the 80s, is a complete series. Like it's finished. The last episode, like it's over. The mutants and the lunatics are in prison. Third Earth has been freed. Thundera is it's been reformed and it's being repopulated. And in the last episode, Mumra gets trapped in the Book of Omens. Like it's done. So if you're gonna take a completed story and do a sequel, there has to be a purpose. You have to have a story that needs to be told. Otherwise, you end up with I hate to go there, the Star Wars sequels, where, like Return of the Jedi into that storyline. Like, well, if you're going to tell another trilogy, there needs to be a story that needs to be told, and you haven't really gotten that. So I like Couch's ideas, especially Lion-O, having to learn to not just be the leader of a superhero team, which is basically what he'd been. He's got to be a governor. He's got to be he's got to be a politician now, a bureaucrat. And that is a story I would like to see. I just couldn't put enough into how to ring an entire series like that. That can be an aspect to it. But I was thinking about the other sequel series, the ones that worked, that fans liked, and it's usually something like Star Trek: The Next Generation or Beast Wars, where it's set in the same continuity, but it's several generations distant from the end of the original series. So you're following a new cast and new adventures just in the same setting, with the same mythology and the same rules. And that tends to be a little more successful than just trying to do a new season that takes place right after the original, especially for a show from so long ago. But that's not necessarily what I'd want to do either, because then you have that problem where audiences are like, what, Lion-O and Tigra, they're not in this? And Panther was not in this. I don't want to watch this. So that's a hard sell where it's in the same universe but it doesn't have the characters people care about. Then I think a reboot has a bit more benefits because now you're leveling the field, you're starting over. You get to play with the original characters, but you get to start over fresh. You just have to. That has its own drawbacks. You don't do that right, people reject it. We had the Cartoon Network ThunderCats, and there was a lot about that show I liked, and maybe we can do a show talking about it one of these times on ThunderCast. But I wouldn't want to do it. Ended on a cliffhanger, and I wouldn't want to do a second season to that though, because there were too many fundamental problems with that show. For everything it did that I liked, like I actually didn't have a problem with them simplifying the setting by just having it all take place on Thundera, no going to Third Earth, that kind of thing. But then they had Mum-Ra come from outer space and be like a scientist who created the ThunderCats, and like, no, I'm not into that at all.
Oh, you didn't like rip off Thanos, Mum-Ra?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, so the problem is that you do a sequel season, a season 2, you got to carry that over. You can't just pretend like that didn't happen. So it's it's kind of toxic. It's tainted, and so if I were to do a reboot, I think about the reboots that I liked. I really liked the 2002 He-Man and the Masters of the Universe reboot, the Toonami one by Mike Young Productions, where that one looked not just at the original Filmation cartoon, but it looked at things like the original mini comics, a lot of the original premise stuff that wasn't in that old cartoon, and it's adapted those elements to kind of create an ultimate He-Man, where everything was very similar to what we understood of He-Man, without completely changing everything. It just added stuff that was always existing in like orbiting continuities, and just folded them all in together into an ultimate continuity, and then explored aspects that the old continuities didn't really get into. Like we got to see origins of characters like Too Bad. Like, where did Too Bad come from? He gets an origin episode. We get these more long, drawn-out story arcs that show like Skeletor's escape from the Dark Hemisphere. That's a big 3-parter at the start of the show. We get this great origin of King Grayskull, which explains, why Adam turns into a big muscle man. Like, why does he look like that when he turns into He-Man? Like, well, he's turning into King Grayskull, essentially. Like, there's all this explored mythology that the old show never really touched upon. The 2003 Ninja Turtles reboot is another great one because it's basically decided that it was going to go back further than the 1987 cartoon, and it was going to adapt the Mirage comics from 1984 and reintroduce those comics to a new generation and do a new spin on those ideas. And it worked really well. I'm very fond of that show. So I would do a new reboot, now to think about it, of ThunderCats, but I would do it similar to the old show, but we have hindsight on our side. So I would probably do the same thing that the Cartoon Network reboot did, where I would simplify it, keep it on Thundera, not necessarily bring in the outer space stuff immediately. I would want to bring in Mandora because I love that character. She's basically Samus Aran, so she's awesome. And so I want her to come into the show at some point. And then when she comes into the show, she can open up the outer space avenue, and then that can bring in some space characters later on. But I wouldn't do things like make Mum-Ra an alien scientist. And there's other ideas. Like we were talking about how Wily Kit and Wily Cat, their whole thing was never explored upon. Like, what were the Wildcats in the Thunderian hierarchy? Never explored. Who were their parents? Never explored. The Cartoon Network series kind of dabbled in that, but making them orphans and having them talk about their mom, but they didn't really go into it enough. I'd go into that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make Lion-O and Tigra brothers. I didn't like that dynamic at all in the reboot.
Yeah, that was a little odd.
Yeah. So I would focus more on story arcs. I do like the episodic nature of the original series, but there's too many characters who show up once and then never again. I would have more recurring villains and a bit tighter knit mythology about it. But it's something I'd have to sit down and write a story Bible out for.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask about episodic versus overarching narrative, because it seems to me like the overarching narrative, you get to polish it more. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender has a definite polish to it. Every episode feels like it's contributing to this overall story.
Mm-hmm.
But the episodic format, it seems to like allow writers to do nutty things as a one-off, and that seems to generate a lot more crazy characters.
So there is so you bring up Avatar, which is a really good example of it's superficially it seems episodic, especially the first season, the Book of Water, where it's just Aang and Sokka and Katara going from one village to another, encountering a conflict, resolving the conflict, and then leaving. But everything that they do in each village progresses their story arc. They are moving in a direct line to where they want to get to. I think they're trying to get to the South Pole in the first season.
North Pole, yeah.
Oh, the North Pole. Sorry, yeah, they're trying to get to the North Pole in the first season. So they're going on a route up to the North Pole, stopping by villages along the way, and they're being chased by Iroh and what's his face?
Zuko.
Guy. Zuko. Thank you. But every person they meet, like they learn something and they apply that knowledge in a later episode, or they gain a new technique that they learned, or they learn something about the mythology of the adventures. I'd be tighter and more focused, and then have what happens in one episode always have payoff a little bit later, and then build towards whatever the season finale would be.
What kind of fascinates me, I think about this a lot, like how do you set up, almost like less what would I do with ThunderCats, but how would you set up a situation like ThunderCats where all these ideas can happen? So, like Genndy Tartakovsky created Samurai Jack, but obviously other writers added insane ideas to that world that were way beyond the scope of what Genndy originally envisioned, right? And so it's almost like the world gets bigger as all of these additional artists add things to it that keep taking it in new directions. And really, ThunderCats and Samurai Jack are the only shows I've seen where I could imagine almost any kind of story being told. Turtles are pretty close because they have like the alien elements and the interdimensional elements. There are very few franchises where any kind of story, from mystery to action to, I don't know, like going back in time and fighting pirates, could work and feel like it fits with everything else. Whereas if I was rebooting it, I'd feel like I've been given these toys. These toys are very special toys. They're irreplaceable. So I have to respect these toys. And it's not really my job to bring in my, awesome new fan character into this world. I am kind of I feel like the job of a reboot writer is you're being given this legacy, and you have to like. That's why I don't envy the job, right? Like you have
I think it's less the job of the individual episode writer. I think the writers need to come in, and the script writer for the episode needs to come in and then just let loose with their idea. It's important that they read the story Bible and that they play within the parameters of the environment. They can't have a character act completely out of character. It's more the job of the story editor, which is why that job is arguably the most important. To say like, no, Panthro would not say this. No, this is discontinuity. We have to fix that. You can't go this far, but they should also encourage the writers to come in full throttle with their crazy ideas, and then only just like rein it back where it wouldn't fit, or just kind of hammer it into place, get that square peg to go into the round hole, so that you can have those crazy out there ideas, but they just have to play within the confines of the mythology you've set up. And a good story editor can do that. And I think the original ThunderCats, as Blauer pointed out in this very episode, was really, really good at that, because he pointed out minutia like the landing beam on the original spaceship. One of them was bad. And so that carried over into, Return to Thundera, where, they explain why that one thing wasn't working. Like, that's really good. The story editing on the Cartoon Network reboot of ThunderCats was bad, where characters would be forgetting their lessons by the very next episode. And there's always this really obnoxious reset where the characters would all be treating Lion-O like crap. Then they would learn at the end of the episode not to treat him like crap. And the next episode, they'd be treating him like crap again.
Right, yeah.
Like Fancy Nancy. Have you guys ever seen Bill Burr making fun of Fancy Nancy? It's great.
No.
Yeah, so I mean, a good story editor makes the big difference like that. But I've been talking for too long, so I'll pass the baton.
All right, Marmaduke, you're up.
Mark kind of touched into what I was thinking about. So actually was really kind of clicking with Couch Boys thing. Literally, the only idea I had was I want to see Lion-O as a dad because I feel like that's a good continuation of his character arc. And I would have a completely different approach to continuing the story than to rebooting it. And so, I guess if I rebooted it, I'd want to do the Netflix direction and say we're going to tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, kind of as Mark was describing it. Maybe using something like Avatar: The Last Airbender as a model, where every episode is combining that. And if continuing it, then maybe a similar pattern, like because there would have to be something overarching, like Lion-O's growth, or now that he's grown into a man, what are the challenges he faces as a man now that he's no longer a cub? I love that everyone calls him a cub.
Cub. I bet Siberius would call him
Cub.
And I'm also kind of interested, like, what could the next, like, if not rebooting ThunderCats, what could the next thing that's like a ThunderCats be? Because I noticed that it's always in the first incarnation that all of the crazy stuff happens, and then it's in the later incarnations that people have to figure out what to do with all of those crazy ideas. I'm also kind of interested in, like, I don't know, like gathering a bunch of artists in the room and saying, you can tell any kind of story, just go for it. You want a robot centaur? Okay, that's fine.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. Do you have any other ideas or thoughts for it, Marm?
I also think it should have an incredibly cutesy cartoon style inspired by...
You keep baiting me like this. And
I actually just mentioned you in a
I
video.
heard.
You have the self-respect not to review ThunderCats Roar, and I respect that.
Come slap the sound out of your name. You keep this up. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead if there's not any problems with it. I'll go ahead and talk about my ideas here.
Is it gonna involve them killing me?
No.
All right.
I wouldn't let them have that. That's my job. Anywho.
ThunderCats meet Marm in a dark alley and then...
All right, so this is something, of course, I've given a lot of thought to because I've always wanted to pitch something to them, but they don't accept outside pitches, so that's never going to happen, unfortunately. So first thing I do is I wouldn't use Avatar or any other modern thing as a guide. I'd go back to the source. And one of the things that has always been the trouble with any reversion of ThunderCats, whether it be comics or whether it be cartoons, is they like the idea, but they don't commit to it. So to take some things and like, oh, this is cool, but I'm going to make it gritty, or this is cool, I'm going to make it childish, or oh, this is cool, but we need to turn characters into mean stereotypes. I would go back to the well. I would go back to the original inspiration for ThunderCats, both in, say, the literary term and in terms of the actual storyboards, the show Bible, stuff like that. That's where I would gleam and have gleamed my idea here. First thing I'm setting up is I set up the backstory of Thundera and Plundar and how that went and played. You'd have two Thunderian wars. The later one is the one that Lion-O's father was involved with. He winds up blinded, has to pass it to Jaga. There's going to be an entire thing that goes into that. Now, I would also use Groon very, very specifically because after the Second Plunderian War is when Groon's rebellion would be, and this is also where I'd tie him into a comic character from back in the 80s named Linxana. And it's where the newer ThunderCats, the ones that we'd be familiar with, Tiger, Panther, and whatnot, wind up having to take over for their parents, who were the original clan leaders, because they died during Groon's rebellion. And at that point, Jaga, of course, has these younger characters, not super young, but for a few years they're leading their clans, they're doing what they're supposed to, coming into the role as ThunderCats, and Lion-O grows into a teenager. And that's when we're starting to have problems with the planet. I wouldn't keep everything on Thundera. I would go buy the book from the original series, and I would build off of it. I would worry less about episodic things. I would worry more about long-term linear storytelling. Not so much with cliffhangers, because I don't have a MacGuffin to chase. I don't want to do any of that. What I want the focus to be is these characters, how they grow, how they adapt, and how they interact when it comes to new locations. And I would specifically code these characters very very definedly. Lion-O, he's going to be in his early 20s, but there's going to be something that, when he leaves Thundera, he's 15. He lands on Third Earth, he's 20. I haven't figured out the exact on this. It's not going to be a suspension capsule malfunction. It's going to be something else. And he has to grow into that role. And I'm not going to use Jaga in the way the original did, because the whole Force Ghost thing I like to get away from. Instead, that's how I'm going to utilize the Book of Omens. It's not just going to be a tome of ancient Thundercat beginnings and whatnot, but it's also going to contain some of Jaga's writings, his wisdom, and his war stories, because that's going to give Lion-O context to what's going on and what's going to help him move forward. I'm going to undo what some people have done. They like to take Panthro, make him this big beefy thing, but that doesn't make any sense. He's a leopard. Leopards are smaller, so he's going to be the shortest of the male Thundercats, but he's going to be absurdly strong. And I'm going to give him a garb similar to what an African knight would wear. A very specific type. I got a sketch for it that Marmaduke has seen that I need to update.
Yeah.
But
I haven't seen this.
So Panthro is going to be coated black, like he was in the original series. Tigra is going to be coated Asian, not just because he's a tiger, but because I'm going to do something specific. Because Tigra's weapon is very unusual, even within weapon aficionados like myself. Like, I'd never once thought to ever use a bolo whip. I'll pull out a pair of sais and a freaking Kusarigama before I'll grab a bolo whip. So that's going to be his strong point. Tiger's not going to be a pompous, arrogant douchebag. He's going to be the guy who had a lot of brothers, and he had to find a very specific thing to excel in, on top of just trying to learn weaponry, because he's not going to be very good at that. So he's going to be he's going to be the group engineer and the group architect and the group scientist. That gives them a better grounding whenever they land on, Third Earth and they have to make do, because people who have a background in science or botany or whatnot are going to have a better understanding of what can and cannot be eaten. I'm going to make the Thundercats a more tightly knit family unit. I'm going to employ a lot more animal-related things. Like the Thundercats are going to hunt in a pack. They're not just going to magically have table food appear. I'm going to do something really wild with Snarf that I don't want to ever bring out in the open, just in case I ever do get a show, because I don't want to pin that away. And I'm going to introduce Mumra early, but I'm not going to have him interact with the Thundercats immediately. I'm going to have him do what evil characters do, send out minions that are going to ultimately fail until he has to realize, this isn't working, my old tactics aren't working, I have to deal with this directly. The mutants are going to be involved, but it's going to be very specific involvement. They're going to be the long-time, arch nemesis of the Thundercats, but it's going to be because they could not properly take care of their planet, so they're looking to expand, to take in resources. And the Thundercats are, they were the primary target, and that's what sparked those wars. I want to be able to touch on pro-social values without going too far one way or the other, simply due to the fact that I want people to bring up their own conclusions. But I want to bring Thundercats back to the focus on things like the Code of Thundera, which was completely missing from the 2011 series. If you cannot go into Thundercats with that grounding, you're going to fail. I'm going to touch on some of the issues, like the politics that Couchboy talked about. Gruen specifically is the person I would have made the racial supremacist. Not so much from a saber-tooth viewpoint, but from we're Thunderians, much like the Wildstorm comic. Like, we should rule everything. We're powerful. We're strong. This makes sense. We can just rule everything and not have to care for the weak. That's what I'm going to do with Gruen. He's going to, of course, have people that follow him, and when they reform Thundera, those people are still going to exist, and Lion-O's going to have to contend with them. I would have Lion-O grow into a proper king. Now, because he is a monarchy as opposed to a democracy, the challenges have to be different. So Mumra's going to have to be involved differently. The mutants are going to have to be involved differently. I'm going to have Rotaro be a far more influential character than he ever was in the original cartoon. In Mandora, if I were given free license, I'd tie her into with Silverhawks.
Huh.
I'd make her tangentially related to them, basically working within the same overall universe, but a different division of the Space Police. So I have all these really wild, big ideas because I like to think broad term, because I drive a lot during work, and that's when I get to think. It's going to be crazy.
Make Snarf a busty anime waifu, says Punchy Sonichu.
No, I will not do that.
something
I will do better than that. But my ideal cast, let's see here. I can't decide who I want to voice Panzer, because I want him to be kind of like, Earl Hyman was, to where you hear it's like, yeah, that guy's black. So, of course, Idris Elba is always a choice, but, he's also really expensive. Keith David was an idea. but he's Goliath.
Overshadow everybody. He has a
Yeah.
voice that's so take command. It's like you'd really wonder why he's not leading the ThunderCats when he has Keith David.
Exactly. So I was also thinking maybe Terry Crews.
True.
Also,
I didn't have a problem with Kevin Michael Richardson's Panthro in the reboot.
I didn't mind the voice, but when I hear Kevin Michael Richardson, I don't hear Panthro. I hear the principal from American Dad.
That's the problem, is that he's in everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you hear him, you associate him with too many different characters.
I haven't decided who I'd get to do Mumra Brock, but I do know who I'd want to get Jaga. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, unfortunately, because I'm not as good with voice actors as I am animation. But he's the guy who did he was on Legend of Korra, Aang's son.
Okay. I have his voice in my head, just not his name.
He also
I know who you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, he was also
Tenzin.
he was also Stanley in Gravity Falls.
J.K. Simmons?
Yes, that guy. That's who I'd get to voice Jaga.
He can. So J.K. Simmons, everyone knows him, as J. Jonah Jameson, right?
Right.
But he can play, different characters. He doesn't always have to be zany and crazy and funny. He's actually pretty good at, especially voice acting. He can play serious roles.
And that's what I'd want, because the original series had Jaga very much so like, with the exception of what happened on Thundera that only Mumra apparently knows about. Jaga did everything right. I don't want to do that with Jaga.
Yeah.
I want Jaga to be wise. But he's wise because things went really bad really quick. And that's why he has to impart this knowledge via writing. Because there's going to be a lot of crazy crap that's going to happen in the past. Jaga's going to have to have some battle scars about all this. I mean, when you look at it like linearly, dude had to put his best friend down. And that sucks. That leaves anybody with some serious issues. I wouldn't cripple him, to say. I wouldn't make him... I have so much regret, I'm so sad. More of just an older, wise guy who's been through a lot of crap. And that's how I'd write Jaga. And, of course, we'd have a lot of throwbacks to past events. Personally, I would love to get, individual movie specials to cover Claudius, Jaga, and a few other things. But that's just me, aiming high in the pie sky. That's just not going to happen, but I'd like it to happen. I put way too much thought into this.
Oh, no. I love the detailed analysis. I'm living for it.
And no, Tara Strong will voice no one. She will not be permitted on this show.
Yeah, tired of her.
But I would like to have what is his name? The guy who did the voice of Stimpy.
Oh, Billy West.
Yes, I want him to voice Snarf.
Yeah, I'd be down with that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. You were
talking to me?
Yeah, you were saying something right before I cut you off by accident.
Oh, yeah, no, just if Jaga does dispense any wisdom in that version or any version, it should probably be to Lion-O, remember the code of Thundera, loyalty, honor, and don't throw any sores into the planet's core. Seriously, trust me.
Actually, I was thinking maybe if Thundera gives you lemons, demand to speak to the lemons manager. I wouldn't know who to get do Mumra's voice, simply because Earl Hammond was such a good voice actor. Not just in ThunderCats, but in general. They took the 2011 Mumra. They didn't make him scary. They made him really quiet. And I'm going to talk like this. But they didn't make him scary. They didn't make him over the top. They didn't make him really verbose. What I would want to do with Mumra is I'd bring him back to his roots. What is he? Well, he's a devil priest. He's demonic. I'd want him to try to throw demons at the ThunderCats, unearthly creatures, things he would usually use to terrify or put down things that would encroach on his territory. He wouldn't face them directly until later in the first season, when he's realized, I can't deal with this like this anymore. And even these Plundarians are not going to be effective enough because there's so little of them. And that's when you have to play on that. I would make Mumra a terrifying creature to build up to, not just, he's going to be a comedic relief villain. He's going to be a constant and ongoing threat because he's going to be smart enough to reevaluate each time. Mm-hmm. And the main thing I would do, I would absolutely bring the Sword of Omens back to being a mystical weapon. Its entire purpose is destroying evil and fighting it. Because unfortunately with the 2011 series, they kind of killed that. And they killed that by making it, it's just a war stone and a sword. No, it has to be XYZ thing for this to work. As far as Hachiman goes, he would be very important as well. First as a counterbalance to, say, the ThunderCats form of honor, because the samurai were much different. If you actually study Bushido, you find out there's quite a bit of difference there. But also, he'd be a good instructor for Lion-O, and he'd also be Lion-O's hardline friend of, this is the guy that when you take him to parties, you have to make sure he doesn't deck somebody. As far as the voice actor for him, I'd love to get the guy who did Usagi's voice from the 2012 TMNT series. That would be perfect casting.
Oh, he was great. I can't recall his name either, but yeah, he was excellent as Miyamoto Usagi.
Oh yeah, it was great. That's also like, I just love Miyamoto Usagi. I like Usagi Yojimbo. It's like my favorite comic.
Dope.
But yeah, I'm doing a deep dive into it right now, starting from the beginning and reading through, because I only read random issues, over the years. Now I'm starting like the saga from the beginning, and it's so good. Every
It is so
issue
good.
is
Did you know?
I don't think there's a bad issue.
Did you know he started as a letterer for? I think it was for the Daily Spider-Man comic strip.
Yep.
And then Stan Lee became like a network guy for him.
Stan Sakai?
Yeah.
Stan Sakai started lettering the Spider-Man comic strip. Yeah.
Really? So that's how he got his into comics, and then he started doing his own thing. Because man.
Yeah.
Well, between that and the He-Man mini comics.
Oh, geez, everybody seemed like they got their start on He-Man back in the day. Like Bruce Timm drew He-Man mini comics before he got into doing animation. Like, I guess that was the proving ground back then.
Also, I'd have space battles by the end of the series. Because I roll hardcore like that.
I like the idea of if you start out on Thundera, show what everything was like on Thundera first, and then if you want to destroy it, destroy it. That almost would seem like it would have more resonance with the audience, where you get us, we become acquainted with Thundera and we become attached to it, and then you take that away from us. We feel it when you take it away from the characters. Like that's a really good angle to take with that.
Oh, I'd have to actually sit down and write down more, because I've been more interested in doing character sketches and whatnot, which I'm going to go ahead and say right now, they'd at least have pants in my variation.
Same here.
But no, I'm sorry, I'm going to draw on a little bit. What I would actually do, also, because Couch talked about it, I'd go around the same route for Bengali. I'd make him bigger, though. Like, he'd be the biggest of the ThunderCats. He'd be a big, thick boy. Lynxo, I would code like a Native American. Because he's a lynx, he's got them big old ears, and he'd be really good at tracking, right? And I actually couldn't decide if I want to do that with Lynxo or if I want to do it with Pumaira, because it would work either way. Both are well known to indigenous peoples here. Very well-known animals, and I could tie that in either way, because I like the idea of the original ThunderCats and the way they were coded, so I like moving on with that. And if you're going to do diversity in a cartoon, there are ways you can do it and ways you can't do it, and the way ThunderCats did it, I think they did it very, very intelligently. They did it organically, and that's what I would do. And introducing other villains would, of course, be ramping things up, so I would want to cover characters like, say, the Lunatax, or, other mutants, Rotaro. I'd love to do all these and introduce new characters. There are some I would not introduce, though. Captain Bragg, I'm sorry. I would not want anything to do with him. He can go away. Same with Mamrana.
Understandable.
Do we have any other questions or comments from the live stream? Okay, my Warrior Maidens, yes, they would exist. I have not figured out how I'd get that by yet. Because how do they reproduce?
With Hachiman.
I kind of like the solution Chuck Dixon came up with. They just kidnap men and kill them when they're done.
Amazon.
I want them to be good guys, Doc. Got it?
That's right. So you got to make a good guy version of that. They rescue men and then let them go.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Catch and release. There you go. Now, I would love to explore the mutants, the main core 4 or Rataro if you want 5 mutants, because I like them a lot, especially in the original series. They all have distinct personalities and voices, but they're all in a way comedy relief villains, and they're all just bad guys. They all go to jail at the end of the series. They're all bad guys, and the reboot, they had an opportunity where they introduced the main mutants in that show, and they gave them all different names and different personalities, but they were still all evil. I think the reboot version of Monkey and 8 people, the reboot version of Jackal Man was like a lunatic, and the reboot version of Vulture Man was just really smarmy and evil. Like, they're all just evil. I would like to look at their personalities and maybe add a different layer to him. Like Jackal Man, he's a coward. Like, well, why is he a coward? Why is he in the army and he's a coward. How did he become a general or a high-ranking officer and be such a wimp?
Yeah.
Like maybe he just doesn't want to be there. So maybe that's the angle you play with him, is that he's in the army, but he's there reluctantly, and that's why he's always the first one to run away during a battle, is because he doesn't want to throw his life down for Plundar for anything. So maybe he's the character who, at one point in the series, when the mutants are about to do something really diabolical, like they're about to raid a Burble village and burn to the ground, and he's holding his axe over like a baby Burble, and he's just like, no, this is wrong, I'm out, I'm not doing this.
Gonna head out.
And he just like, yep, I'm a head out. And he just leaves, and that's your angle on Jackal, and you have that be a character change that lasts. Like when Jackal Man leaves, he leaves for good. Maybe he's not going to join the ThunderCats because he doesn't want to fight, he doesn't want to he doesn't want to go to war. He's a coward, maybe, but he wants to live, and he just wants to live in peace. And so the ThunderCast just let him go and live in peace. Maybe he comes back later and pays it forward in another episode and helps them when they need him or something. Or maybe the mutants try to track him down for being a deserter, and he has his own little arc there. But there's something more interesting you can do with the mutants as characters.
Oh, absolutely.
Rather than just have them all be just bad guys.
Yeah, what I was thinking similar things, like in my pitch, Jackal Man, he wouldn't have been the guy to turn tail in that sense. He'd been more like a Starscream type. Like, I'm a coward, but I'm conniving because I like power. Slithe would have been the one that's driven by lack of self-importance, which is why he takes his own little band and runs off because, I'm going to prove to everybody I know what I'm doing, and he screws up all the time. Vulture Man would be the one he's the big brain one, right? And he has all these inventions, and nobody shows him respect, and that would be the driving force for him. Monkeyan, though. Monkey, going to have fun with, because in the original cartoon, he was a complete and utter dunderhead. I would do similar. However, I'd make him an idiot savant. Monkeyan can't do dick. He's not very smart in most ways, but when it comes to like puzzle solving and using like engineering intelligence, that's where I'd utilize. I would make him an idiot savant, and that would be his motivation. So going into that, and of course Rotaro, like, they got this entire scheme about like political underhandedness and basically ruling Plundarian society via proxy, because he's a rat, and that's what rats do.
I see.
I'd like to see that angle on Slithe as well, because he was the galley cook for Rotaro.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's such a great little like seed of a backstory for him. And he's trying to prove that I can be a better leader than Rotaro, and at his core he's just a cook. And so he's just got these delusions of grandeur. He's like Squidward from SpongeBob, he's a cashier, and he wants to be this great like flute or flautist or whatever you call him. But no, you're just a cashier, dude. Like, you're just a cook.
We all know we all know the real reason why Slithe left. He ran into the Plundarian version of Gordon Ramsay. What is this? What is this? Raw! Where's the lamb sauce? Oh, I would love to get him to voice a character. It
explains why his high command that he took with him are like, they're all they're losers. I mean, Jackal Man's a coward, Monkeyan's an idiot. Vulture Man has great ideas, but he's really impractical in a lot of ways, or he's rebellious. So his whole like merry band of mutants that are often they're all misfits like he is, which could be an interesting angle to take with all of them, if maybe they're all just misfits.
But no, I would have a lot of fun. I'd also probably introduce more cat characters, and what I would do is I would put meme cats in the background of different Thunderian shots for both before the planet blows and later on. So you might see like a Thunderian bazaar in the back, like there might be Poop Cat manning a door. I would have too much fun with that. I would have way too much fun.
The planet's about to explode, and there's just this one cat playing the keyboard in the background.
Don't start. See you later, Brock. All right, so this stream has gone on for close to 2 hours now. So next time, let's see here. Pull up my handy-dandy list of cartoons I got to be watching here. So we're going to cover 2 more episodes next time. Anytime, phone. I probably should have all these memorized by now, but I don't because I'm old. Let's see here. The Astral Prison and the Crystal Queen are the next 2 episodes. Really good episodes. So we're going to be covering that. Unspecified. Actually, no. Let's go ahead and bring the pain for the comic review. Let's bring the pain. We're going to cover the ThunderCats Superman crossover.
Oh boy.
Oh,
Oh.
no,
Wait,
I
the
read
first
that.
issue
Okay.
is it
long
multiple
time ago.
issues?
Just one. Just one.
Okay.
God was merciful to us this time. Now the question
You're
is,
not going to make us read the Battle of the Planets crossover? Thank God.
we actually did it earlier. And we kind of come
You
to
did? Oh, no.
the Battle of the Planets crossover. Oddly enough, out of all the crossovers ThunderCast ever done, that's the best one.
The real question is when are we gonna do Dogs of War?
I thought we were never going to speak of that.
Understandable, and I hope we
No,
don't.
we will have to eventually, just due to the fact that this is like a ThunderCat centric podcast. So probably be doing right to do it. But all right, so now we have to figure out what hero do we cover for next time, because we did Mongor and the Inflamer. So what character should we cover for next time? Does the chat have any recommendations?
Trying to think of what heroes we have left. Did we do Wily Kit and Wily Cat, or just one of them?
Oh, I can't remember.
Just Cat.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
it's just
so
Cat.
yeah, we could do Wily Kid.
We could do Wily Kit, and let's see, we'll throw in somebody else there because that's not going to be much to cover.
Have we done all the main ThunderCats?
No, there's still a few we're missing. I tried to get outliers first before we get into the meat of it, because whenever we cover Lino, I'd actually like to have Larry Kenny on. But that's going to have to be
That's going to be a long discussion on Lino.
Well, it's also going to be a very special episode because Larry Kenny's not up at this time of night. He's usually on Saturday morning, so I'd have to make sure we all schedule that properly. I wouldn't want to make anybody here in the cast miss out on that, because that'd be great. Larry's fun to talk to. He's really fun to talk to.
That would be.
You just always made me feel like I was the virgin and Chad me whenever he was on a stream. Holy cow, that man!
For Kenny, I could probably talk to him for hours just about Count Chocula.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure he'd like to hear it.
I'm pretty sure if Larry Kenny, if I got to be on the same podcast as Larry Kenny, I probably wouldn't be talking at all because I'd be too busy having a stroke.
He's great.
You just want to listen to him.
I'm just like, I don't. What did I do to deserve to be in the presence of this legend?
I mean, he's still in Skittles commercials. Let's see, what could we do? Either we can do another character retrospective on top of Wily Kit, or we could do something a little more sidelined. Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to talk about like the 2011 cartoon, only 2 of us have seen it. 3 of us, I think. Couch, myself, and Mark. I don't think Marm's seen any of it. Because Marm's still got to finish the original series, Marm!
I sat down and I got all the way through Lino's, anointment trials. So I got a chunk done.
Oh, that's an idea. Let's talk about the Warrior Maidens.
Oh yeah, they were in a bunch of episodes.
Oh yeah. Big
Do
Black.
we ever see more than just the 2 of them?
No, we see entire tribes of them.
All right.
I
They like to
think
shoot
only
things.
Willa and her sister are the only ones that get personalities, though, right?
Yeah, Willa and Nada are the only ones ever named because, they're an entire society and that would take forever.
Yeah.
And we actually did talk about Pumaira, like, way back near the beginning of the cast, like, first few episodes. And
Before I was here.
Yeah, that was back when Joe and Tyler were still joining me. I still miss them, but you guys are a lot of fun, too.
Yeehaw.
But we're gonna.
So we're the ThunderCast version of the Bengali and Linkso and Pumaira. We're the second generation of expansion ThunderCats.
Maybe, but at the same time, you've also gotten more airtime.
True.
All right, so chat. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a few seconds. If you guys got anything else to say, anything to add, and if you send me like a $5 super chat, I'll say something in Snarf's voice. How's that sound?
All right.
I don't expect anybody to actually send me money. Out of your mind.
Send you $5 not to do a Snarf impression. No, your Snarf impression's actually on point.
God. I actually listened to Retro Blasting. They did an entire historical panel on ThunderCats years ago, and they were actually having people come up and try to do Snarf's voice to win a prize, and I was irritated. I'm like, I can do this voice. Why can't any of you?
I think you got a $5 super chat.
Mine is even worse. I feel
don't
like I could
think
do
so. I'm not seeing anything pop
Snarf
up.
A lot better than Snarf.
Nope, nothing popped up.
Shoot, I was trying to send a $5 super chat, but I don't have my credit card on me.
Ha ha! Well,
My evil
I was gonna
I
pay you
wonder
to say
if I was
something
going to
in
do
Mumra's
anything
voice, but-
ridiculous to annoy Lio.
I'll tell you what, since you guys are part of the cast, you can just request it. How's that sound?
I was going to send you a $5 super chat that said, I'm Snarf and I love Thunder. My plan failed.
All right.
I'm not a good troll.
All right, so instead, I'm just going to find out where you live and beat you to death while saying, Snarf, Snarf. Oh, Marm, you were asking for this one. Snarf, Snarf. What did you want me to say, Couch Boy?
I might be a little too political for this chat, but I kind of wanted you to say trans rights in Mumra's voice.
Well, I mean, I'm all for that type of positivity. I guess we could. But the
Complete
question...
with the rolling R and everything.
Let's see. There's got to be more than just trans rights.
I mean, that's kind of the meme. Is trans rights gets inserted randomly, out of the blue.
All right. Let me see if I can do this. Trans rights, yeah.
Oh my god! I'm gonna have a stroke.
Bro turns into a woman all the time. He'd be totally down with trans rights.
So good.
I'd have had you say in Snarf's voice, snitches get stitches, Lion-O.
Oh, Lion-O, snitches get stitches. All right, I gotta do this for Carl. When will you learn, Snarf, that your actions have consequences, Lion-O?
God. If anyone wants to request anything, I do a decent Snarfer voice. The worst version of Snarf.
Does that mean I have to yell at you for going to Snarf College that actually does exist in the world of ThunderCats?
Snarfer, screw you, Dad. Not everyone can be a stupid boomer like you.
Now you listen to me, you little whippersnapper. I was playing Doom back on a Windows XP.
Okay, boomer, Snarf.
Honestly, I think Snarf would probably prefer that to his real name. All right, so I think that's enough madness. Thank you guys on the chat for joining us. 15 watching, pretty steady. We'll be doing this again next month. Thank you all for joining us. And everybody, go ahead and say your sign-offs.
Later.
Thanks for tuning in.
Love you guys. Catch you later.